Welcome. What do you think explains the rise of Meloni in Italy? Is there a role of oligarchs and billionaires in supporting the extreme right? In the 90s, as we said before, there was a strong movement against neoliberal globalization and then the Iraq war. We remember the European Social Fora in Genoa and Florence. Later, we saw Occupy Wall Street connect with Athens and Madrid to protect working people from paying for the crisis. Do you believe we need a progressive movement across the Atlantic? And last but not least, if you can tell us a bit about how the very successful demonstration for Gaza was built in Rome 3 days ago.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you to Alexis Tsipras for this invitation. It's for me very important to be here. And let me start by saying that I cannot agree more with what Senator Sanders just said before. We must offer an alternative and try to change the paradigm. Democracy is obviously under attack in all of our countries. We see it. And the fight for democracy and fairness is no longer national. It has to be transnational. It has to be global. Because the extreme right are getting together, and there is an unprecedented power that they own, economic power and also technological power now with data. And it's not something, to answer your question, that we don't know in my country, Italy. You know, we had Berlusconi, who was owning half of the media. But today, oligarchs have new means and technological means, so it's a new challenge. If you think about it, Trump's second mandate is even more aggressive than the first one. We see mass deportation, trade wars, authoritarian control, as we are seeing now in the streets of Los Angeles and San Francisco. So the extreme right has now leadership, and they have a narrative, and they have means. That's why I think it's so important for us to be here today together, because we must not leave internationalism to the extreme right nationalists. Their rhetoric of hatred and discrimination always points out at the same enemies in all of our countries. Who is different? Migrants, emancipated women, LGBTQI plus communities, but also human rights and climate activists. But in the end, the message of hatred would put them enemies on the opposite sides of the borders that they want to build in all the walls that they want to build in every border. You know that they are building actually walls. They're doing it in the United States, in Hungary, in many European countries. So my point is they strengthen each other with the same rhetoric of hatred and discrimination. But we can name them in every country. Orban, Kaczynski, Farage, Le Pen, Meloni, Salvini, Trump, Biden. But the point is, where are we? Where is the place where we stand together? That's why it's so important to be here today in this event. I can remember, Alexis will remember, one of the last pictures in which we were together, the left progressive were together, was in Athens, when he was in government with Pablo Iglesias on one side and Ska Keller from the European Greens on the other side. We must do much more, because they are strengthening each other, and we have to do the same. Think about a rally that we can do in all our countries on 3 things on which we are fighting together. For example, decent wages, housing for all, fighting tax havens and fairer taxation, access to health and education for all, or clean energy. And Bernie Sanders was mentioning, for example, the fight on reducing the working hours without reducing wages. Somebody called it the 4 days week. We have done a proposal with the other opposition in Italy on this important issue, because time is a very important issue for people and families today. Time is stolen by people today. So it's another thing on which we can fight together and show that we have a common agenda across every border. And I think also that it's important to think about the enemies that the extreme right are pointing out. We have to stand with them, because Also Meloni here in Italy, you say, why did she win? Well, it's a number of reasons. In the country we have very high inequalities, as Bernie was telling about the US. Also in Italy we have very high inequalities. There was a lot of frustration and precarious jobs. And we went through a pandemic in which she was out of the government. There was a technical government with everybody in, basically, apart from Meloni on the extreme right and a party on the left. So the point is that she did not take responsibility in difficult times. So when the election came, some people said, let's try with her, let's try where it goes. But the point is that they are already disappointed, because after 2 years and a half of Meloni's government, she is cutting down the public health system. She is cutting down 6,000 teachers in public schools, and she is blocking our proposal for minimum wages in Italy, where you know that we have the lowest wages, among the lowest wages in all the European Union. So you see that we can beat them, but we will not beat them by running after them on their agenda. This is a mistake that many social democracies parties, the social democratic parties, have done through the years. Every time we run after them, they grow stronger. So we must offer an alternative. And we cannot beat them by running after them, but by forcing them on the most uncomfortable ground for them, which is social justice, for example, education, healthcare, decent jobs and decent wages for all. On these issues, we can beat them, and in Italy we are beating them, for example, in many regional and also local elections in these past 2 weeks. You were asking about a very big rally that we had on Saturday. We launched them together with other opposition parties, progressive parties, for what is happening in Gaza, and I fully agree with what, again, Bernie was saying before. We must stop Netanyahu's extreme right government crimes in Gaza, and this is another issue which I think we should all mobilize across Europe, because we must reach a ceasefire, free all the hostages, but at the same time unblock all the humanitarian aid that is needed in Gaza. And finally, as many governments are doing, fully recognize a state for Palestinians, because they have a right to have a state. And we still believe in the solution of 2 states and 2 people, but in order to achieve that with this extreme right government, we must stop them and recognize the Palestinian state. So we had 300,000 people here in Rome protesting together, also against the silence of our government, because our government did not even vote in the European Union to review the cooperation agreement between the EU and Israel. And this is putting Italy on the wrong side. And in Italy, many people do not accept it. So, just to conclude, I think that we have many arguments to fight the extreme right. I think that the extreme right is emptying democracy by using democratic means. And we have to ask ourselves, how do we protect democracy and politics from the impact of oligarchs and multinational companies, for example? So the question is, how can we compete with this concentration of power? And for example, with Musk. Musk can decide today the volume of our voices on X, on one of the platforms. So I will support completely Pedro Sanchez's proposals to regulate platforms, for example, also with mandatory identity, because we cannot accept that we can see all this hatred in this platform and we cannot even recognize who's behind this hatred. So I think that we should do a lot together, revert their narrative. Meloni's most famous speech, if you remember that, was, "I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm a Christian." Good for her. But it doesn't tell us how it can help people in Italy to earn decent wages and to pay their bills. we have in Italy the highest cost of energy bills across the whole European Union. So this is the kind of issue on which we can rebuild trust with citizens because they feel lost in these difficult times. So thank you for this occasion. You will always count on our support in order to strengthen our network of progressive across any borders. I think we have hope. We've seen it in the square of Rome the other day with 300,000 people. It was massive, but we see also Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders having huge rallies across the United States. I am sure that also in other countries in Europe and elsewhere, this is happening. We have to connect with each other and strengthen each other, and we must not leave international to the nationalists because we have much more in common in terms of values and in terms of proposals. So, comrades, let's keep fighting together.